Basically, a stream was a place that water would be filtered. It would go through sand, it would go through wetlands, and it would be cleansed. So the first function of a stream is to filter the water and to infiltrate the water. Our streets aren't doing that. So what we've done is we've created standards that would take that same runoff that comes down your gutter and bring it through your curb, through a hole in your curb face, behind the curb into the parkway, where you would create the same type of an ecosystem that the stream would have created. So you would create a sand filter, perhaps. You would create a recirculating system with a solar panel, perhaps. So you filtered it. You could infiltrate the water so that you restore some of the groundwater if it's in an area that's conducive to that type of approach. And you would grow plants. And you know, the thing about the plants is that there's so many other benefits of cooling an environment that will happen because you've created an ecosystem for habitat and for cooling that beautifies your area, that there's just no way to actually quantify the way we normally want to do with our, you know, with our projects. Normally we just want to take a project and say, how much did it cost you to take that much water and treat it? And that's okay. That's how we do it. That's a single purpose approach. But what's really been a hard thing to do is to balance what I just said, which is cost, you know, cost balance, with what the benefits are to nature, to a beautiful home, to a cooler environment, to a tree on your street, the value to your property, the value to health for kids walking to school. All of those values they call qualitative have never been effectively captured in order to justify the approach of nature, which ironically is the same approach that brought us here. That's why we're alive. So we have something that's staring us in the face, and we're looking at it in the old eyes of single purpose infrastructure, which is to say, you know, we only have to take on one thing at a time and look at things in a very black and white way. And that's been one of the lags behind this whole process taking root. So for streets, the two things I think need to happen is, once you have to have settling of the stormwater, and the settling of the water will help to remove some type of pollutants. They're called sediments that are suspended in the water, and they're attached to other pollutants like metals. UV sunlight can help to remove bacteria and kill some of the pathogens that may be present in the water if it's contaminated. Biological treatment happens in the root zones and healthy soils. So healthy soils, plants, and water together make a great team that allow photosynthesis to happen. Plants can grow. They can harness sun energy and create carbohydrates, which is another type of energy that we can eat, and that is used for animals to, you know, basically to survive. So all of those benefits come by bringing the water from just a concrete gutter into a parkway and doing it right in the right area.
So just a quick follow-up on that. So then what you envision is, when it rains, rather than all that water just going down the street, but that is kind of constantly diverted first into parkways and that kind of thing, and then also into residential yards if they're built in such a way to assist in water capture, or how does it actually kind of
Well, you're asking, that's a very good question, because there's a lot of liability issues that come into play when you would bring street water into a private parcel that may not be functional. But we have plenty of parkways on our big streets. Look at our corridors. Like, I like to think of Vermont Avenue with that 80-foot median that's bringing all this water down this arterial street that's 100 feet wide. Think about a 100-foot wide cross section of a street. How much water are we wasting there that would have gone into the earth, that would have been filtered or perhaps used and recharged our aquifer? Instead, we run that into the ocean. So here's what I would suggest is that, when we look at the passive way that water flows by nature, just by the slope of a street, the topography, and then we look at when we create these projects, we're also creating storage, we're creating capacity. The systems that we build in many ways function to offset the way we've developed our city, the way we've overpaved and we've overbuilt. So what they're doing is they're making more storage where there wasn't any, perhaps. So my point is that storage can be used to be refilled by recycled water. So when we create recycled water from our wastewater, it gets pumped back out to our spreading grounds, where DWP spreads it and infiltrates it so that it can replenish our groundwater aquifers, and they can treat it and pump it and sell it, you know, basically sell it back to the customers. The point is that we have a whole watershed that's been deprived of a lot of water. So if we could put that water back at the rate that it's been run off, we could create a sustainable city that recreates our pre-development hydrology. And ironically, recreating our pre-development hydrology, it sounds like a big words, it just means putting things back the way they were, is the goal of everything that we do, everything we've been mandated to do. But if we don't have that water to put back, and if we don't have the capacity to put it somewhere, we can't do it.
Deborah, how long do you think it'll take to implement a vision like this?
Well, with money, you know, everything can be possible in whatever timeline you'd like. But my point is we've got $300 million a year countywide for the city and the county of Los Angeles. And I would estimate that if everyone took an approach like this and we targeted the right streets to do it in, we could do a big piece of it in 5 years, which is what the 5 years funding windows are, what we use for our funding requests. We have 5-year capital improvement programs. In 5 years, we could make a major stab at it with lots of lessons learned that we would go back to the drawing board with, and just like nature, they would evolve. Evolution's a big part. They call that adaptive management. And to date, we really haven't done well with that because frankly, humans are proud organisms. They like to think that everything they did was good for the first time they did it. And sometimes that's just not true.
Deborah, once again, just what are the things that then homeowners can do to be part of the kind of system that you're envisioning?
Well, they can look at the size of their lot or their property and the size of their roof, and they can figure out how much rain has left their property that should have gone into the ground if their house wasn't there. That's the way LID works. So if I had 100 square feet of, let's just make it simple. I had a 100 square foot rooftop and I had 1 inch of rainfall, which is the design that they calculate. So I have 1 inch over 100 feet. That's how much water I should keep on my property. It's pretty simple. That's called low impact development. It's really not complicated or magic. And the way you would do it is you would create you use rain barrels, rain gardens, a berm, a berm in your swale so it doesn't just run out into the street. Whatever you do to capture that 1 inch over the surface of your roof, the air footprint of your roof, and I hate to say this, but you've also got to add in your sidewalks, your swimming pool, all the things that don't let water soak in. You add those up. That's what you need to keep on your site. And you reuse that. That is sustainability, the way we've defined it.
Thank you so much. I live in the county of LA in an urban wildlife interface area in the foothills of the San Gabriels. And I was curious as to how integrated your work is with the county, and if there's anything I could access through the county, website or what, something that's tied in with what you're doing in the city. And then also, have you targeted particular areas like South LA, where there's more concrete than anything else sometimes? Or are you focusing only on District 5? What is the plan in terms of moving ahead?
Well, if you ask me, I'm an oddball. I'm a landscape architect. We have 3,500 engineers where I work. So we have both perspectives of, what's our flood control goals and what's our city goals as far as moving people in South LA towards a more sustainable, environment where it's tree shaded and cool or whatever. And DWP has their mandates and we have our mandates and the county has their mandates. So each one of those has great resources, but you have to remember when you look them up, where they're coming from. My caveat to everybody is, what's their mandate? Why are they doing this? Why do we do this? Why do humans need to do that, which should trump everybody else? And so for me, I find myself here, I'm home, this is my day off. I'm talking from a human standpoint first. Okay, that's where I am first. But really, we have water goals. County of Los Angeles has got the Department of County Health, so their requirements are very much geared towards protecting the health of people who use this stormwater. So for instance, if I were to bring this water off the street, they would be concerned about what people can touch, what they might inhale, respire, like what kind of viruses could they get, or what kind of, impacts would happen to them. So one of the things that we looked at when we did our standards for these projects was putting it underground where nobody could touch it. And we did that. So nobody can touch it. We've overcome the need of over-engineering and chlorinating and all this other these costly processes to clean the water. So the county has put that onto their website. For me, that's the most valuable thing they have. It's the Department of County Health Water Quality Standards. It'll tell you what your gray water has to do, what your, what every type of water has to meet the standards. So that's a huge resource. You asked what the county has. That's their goal. South LA, I kind of touched upon that, but the biggest thing that they need is they need storage because their whole watershed is paved. Those people, their trees are dying. We put them in the next week. They had the water truck doesn't come, they're dead. So for me, storage, water, and then the other thing is backfilling those storages, because if you build the storage and you don't get a lot of rain, which we don't, we get 16 inches a year. If you don't backfill it with recycled water, you're wasting money. You're not building a sustainable process. We need to backfill our water supply. And this is something that goes against some other of our partners, because obviously if I was selling water to people, I wouldn't want to distribute free water to the whole city, right? But I know that 85% of the water in the city is running into the ocean, and that water has to go back. I know. So it's a big challenge to meet their goals, our goals, and human goals. So I guess it depends who you are.
Deborah, I was struck by 85% of the water then that comes down goes out to the ocean. So that's extraordinary. Now, what percentage what do you reasonably need to adjust that to? And over what period of time can that be done? I mean, of course, what you'd want to adjust it to is 100%, but but kind of how are you planning?
Okay, but let's just say in a perfect world, we had all the money we needed and we wanted to do what you just said, okay? What we would do is we would approach MTA and we would approach Caltrans and different transit agencies, and we'd look at the freeways and we'd say, hey, folks, you guys have built beautiful double-deck freeways on the 110. The 5 is getting ready to be expanded by 4 lanes on either side. You're about ready to take people's homes away and kick them out where they can't really buy another one. Why don't you just recreate the pre-development hydrology on your top deck? Hey, and instead of putting those two lanes on either side of the freeway and kicking people out of their homes, why don't you put them up there at the same time? Because a lot of times they're just proposing 4 lanes. We could propose the whole thing. These things have been built. So back to Amy. Amy said, how long is it going to take? Well, time is money. And when you have money, you can do anything you want. So my point is, if you wanted to do this tomorrow, you ask Caltrans, how long will it take you to build that? And we have a timeline. We have a cost per linear foot. And we would say, this street is running off horrible pollution into our waters. And that's a street we want to have a greenway. I want that greenway to go from MacArthur Park Lake to Marina Del Rey. I want people in the inner city to be able to go up an off ramp just like you do down here on the 105 on their bikes with their kids and their strollers. I want them to be able to walk to Marina Del Rey. I want that water to be cleansed. 100% of the water that would have fallen on that freeway will be cleansed by a sand filter that's 18 inches deep, that has grass on top of it, that has under drains, that collects it, that stores it, that recirculates it, and that gives that water, once it's clean, to the streets below so that they can use it for their trees. None of the things I just said haven't been done or couldn't be done. And back to the beginning of the talk, nothing is new under the sun. And this has already been done, and we could do it if we had the money. What we know right now, and I've made this pitch to others in the city for different projects, and some of them are being built right as we speak. I give the people who are doing the work and implementing full credit for doing this, because this has to be done soon. If not, we're going to have problems. I mean, we already have problems. We have huge problems, and almost of them that we have are caused by our single purpose solutions that don't consider what nature would have given us. And it's very hard to do that. That's why we have to adaptively manage our projects, because what nature would have given us is often beyond our imagination. And what it does give us is the potential for those cities in South LA to create baskets, to weave baskets out of the grasses that we just grew that were the filters on our street, to do it to a concert, or to sell tamales. All the things that we would do on a street that's been treated the way we're talking right now are so much different than they would be done on a street that's pure concrete and asphalt, and they'd be cooler. So my point is that the second deck means 100% of the rainfall doesn't get to run off. It means 100% capture. And it doesn't have. Go ahead.
Yeah, so this is a second deck. I mean, just to be clear, it's like if you think of the freeways, then you're talking about building a deck, which is almost like a umbrella or something, which is entirely for rain capture.
Exactly.
And so that's that umbrella system that runs above all the freeways, and that would be a way of now capturing 100% of at least that falls on those freeways.
So, right. And so what I would do if you wanted to set up a pilot, I would go to Imperial Highway right here by my house, which is a freeway that comes down to the airport. And I would say we only use 2 lanes or 4 lanes of that freeway. So when you come on the freeway on either direction, I'd say those 4 lanes on either side will remain open, but in the middle, we're going to do a pilot, and we're going to do something like this and do a pilot for a couple of years. Or, you know, I mean, that way you don't, I think showing people how things work first is always a better way than just building it and getting the money, because investors don't like that. But I think that we have examples that have worked. Our city could be the most beautiful city on the planet with 0 runoff if we did it from those streets, if we did something that we've already done. So there you go. It's all about money.
Deborah, is there any way we can advocate to get some of these things done? Is there any little system in place? I imagine not, but what would be something we could do beyond, you know, putting a berm and a swale in our yard?
There's things you could do to do a pilot. And I think if not there, somewhere that helps people who are facing eviction, they're facing eminent domain, they're facing horrible things because we can't think better than this. All we can do is make wider freeways. If you go to Japan or other countries, freeways can be 30 lanes. So is it going to keep getting wider? You know, I mean, we have to be a little bit more environmental. And the problem is we're fighting a paradigm where it's all about money. It's all about volume of water, sailing, you know, it's all about money. And we know that there's things more valuable than money. We know it, but we can't put it in gold standard or gold backs, you know, or oil back standard currency. That's something that you could do. I mean, and I think the people, if they all get, you know, basically the overriding sentiment of the populace is going to be what determines you're too late to do it. That's where I think it's going to be very sad. But we say, hey, we should have done this 10 years ago. And I don't know what to say about that. You know, that's what we're facing.
Deborah, so it's clear now from my perspective in terms of that kind of umbrella structure or something on freeways. What about, so I live on just a normal kind of city street, though it's pretty wide, there are 4 lanes. And so with that kind of street, for instance,
yes.
Now what do you do? Because when it rains, it becomes a river. And what is your plan for dealing with just a regular city street like that wouldn't have that umbrella structure over it?
Okay, slowing the water down. Basically, we talked about that, how you would slow it down by not having it go in concrete, having it go on pervious soil or even permeable pavers on a pervious surface. Slow it down, sink it into the earth, retain it with a berm, or use it or capture it at the end of the berm and then recirculate it in your property. Recirculating water on your property is mimicking nature, because that's what it's called, the hydrologic cycle. And the cycle, so when you do it on your property, the hydrologic cycle is very small. But if I'm working on a project at MacArthur Park and I create capacity for a stormwater, I draw the lake down, say I make the lake completely empty and I capture all that water. And I use that water to irrigate all the plants in that park. So the plants and the grass are all watered by the water that I just captured. And that water goes back to the lake. If it goes back into the lake, see, basically it's sloping, you know, the water slopes into a lake, basically, it kind of comes down. So the water goes to all the irrigation, it goes through the grass, it gets filtered, it goes back into the lake, and then it gets cleaned again, and it does it again. So from the lake all the way to the Hyperion treatment plant, there are drains. There are storm drains in place right now. So those storm drains will take any overflow from that lake and run that to the Hyperion, where it gets cleaned. It gets treated mechanically and biologically by our treatment plant in efficient ways. When that water is cleaned, it's going back to the city as recycled water. So that's being pumped. And I never got to that on the interview, because that's kind of gets out of the realm of what people can do. But they're basically, there's pumped water that's pressurized, and there's water that's flowing by gravity. So the water flows from the lake by gravity, and then from the Hyperion, it's pumped back to the spreading grounds. But it can also be pumped back to these South LA. It can be pumped back to the streets and to your block for your trees. So, but your trees, just so you know, your trees are a different type of overhead structure. They're, as you know, I mean, the trees are just the trees are the model that you're building off of with the freeways. You know, if you were going to make them permeable, the tree canopy is another deck. It takes the water, it collects it transpires it. It basically holds water in the ground in its root structure. So, I mean, it keeps the soil from being too compacted, so it just runs off. It makes healthier soils in your street parkway. I'm sorry. I know that when you talk about these things, you have to know what you've already talked about, because you have to follow through. And these are, everything I'm talking about is cyclic. It's nothing just, this is the linear solutions are catch basins, curbs and gutters, streets, LA River channel of concrete. All of those are linear structures. Everything that you and we're all talking about now is a cycle.
So, for instance, let's take Fairfax Boulevard as an example. So the water, would there be a structural change to the water that would fall on Fairfax and flow down the street? Or would it be, yeah.
I don't know that street, but I would tell you at the minimum, you could take water on most streets that have parkways through the curb, behind the curb into the parkway. So that would be a structural change that would water the trees.
Okay.
Now, what you would do with it depends on how fast the soil infiltrates the water into the groundwater. If it's a very good infiltration, some people will say, just let it infiltrate. If it's not good infiltration, if it's clay, let's say it's clay, the water can be protected from infiltration or from causing problems in your street with plastic liner and then covered with sand. And then that little system with the liner and the sand would recirculate the water back for all the trees on that block along that whole parkway. So you've created a standard that works in that 5 foot wide or 10 foot wide parkway that's 18 inches deep. And that system created capacity, that created storage. That 18 inches deep by 5 foot wide, 40% of that is storage for stormwater. That's creating a stream along your street. So it's a real model. I mean, it's physical. People may not see that because I don't know, it's hard. Maybe it's hard to picture it until you've built one or you've seen how it works. But if you think about a stream with sand on the banks, what are they doing? What's the banks doing? It's settling in the water, and the water still runs down the stream. You just don't see it. It's underground. We're doing the same thing. And the storage that you create makes up for all the water that's being run off. So that's why you have to have storage, because if not, we don't get enough rain in Los Angeles to make this work. It just doesn't. You tell a native plant, survive, you're getting the natural rainfall. You're not giving it the natural rainfall. You've paved everything around it. All that water that would have gone into the earth and that would have moved laterally to keep that plant alive isn't there. So people say, oh, I planted native plants. Why didn't they work?
So essentially what you want to do, let's say if there's a 4-lane, which Fairfax right over here is, 4-lane boulevard, then probably what you would want is, and then there's parking on either side. So effectively 6 lanes. So what you probably would, and there's also a median on part of it. What you probably want to do is then rethink the median so that it then it is used for the capturing of what you're talking about, so that the water, I'm just trying to think from a practical standpoint, how do you change something like exactly what the change would be?
So a street looks like this in cross section. It looks like a mountain, right?
Yeah.
So the water's going to run to the sides. So what you would do is you'd filter and clean the water on the sides, and you'd store it on the sides, or you would pump it to the median and store it in the median. The point is, it's going to run to those places. But once you've captured the water on the parkways or wherever you filtered and cleansed it, then you can use it anywhere. You can use it anywhere you want.
So your idea then is to create storage under, so if it's running over there to the sides, you'd create large storage,
Underground drains. So
underground drains.
each side would have an underground drain to a storage chamber. And
Okay.
yeah, and we've installed these chambers. In fact, I put one in, I have it on video, putting it in 4 hours. And it's 10,000 gallons.
Wow.
So we just basically, we dropped it in, and now we have a 350-foot long bioswale that's recirculating the water in there's 5 benches that go for 50 feet each, 5, 5, 5, 5. That's 250 feet long. That water goes through each one, spreads it on each bench. Then as soon as it overflows that bench, it flows to the next lower one. No, every time it overflows to the next lower bench. It's collected in storage. And then we have a small solar pump, 1/4 horsepower pump, pumps about 1.5 gallons a minute back to the top with a solar panel. That's fully sustainable. All of us could be dead and that thing would just keep running if we didn't have any, people to run it. It would run. That is recreating nature.